Hey guys, welcome to the PC port analysis for The Division beta. So before I start the video, I have to say that this game is still in beta, so things are subject to change, and there will most likely be performance optimizations before the game's release on, I believe, March the 16th. But while we had access to the beta, I thought I would show you guys what kind of options you can expect to find and what kind of performance we are getting at this state, at least at this point in the game's development. So without further ado, let's get started. So heading over into the options screen under controls, we have everything you would expect to find. Mouse sensitivity and mouse aim sensitivity. Always nice to see that there are two separate options here. In the recent Rise of the Tomb Raider PC port, there was no mouse sensitivity option, only mouse aim sensitivity. For those of you who use gamepads, we have look sensitivity and aim sensitivity as well. Invert, press to sprint, and when we're on press to sprint, I will say there's an extremely large amount there's an extremely large amount of running in the game, so this is a godsend. Press to sprint. Vibration, for those of you who are using a controller, and button layout. There isn't, by the looks of it, any kind of customization for controllers, but there is a southpaw setup or the default setup. And then of course mouse acceleration, which I would advise most of you to turn to off. Moving on to key mapping, we can see that there are key bindings for pretty much everything in the game, and there are alternate key bindings for pretty much everything in the game as well, which is always good to see. Sometimes it is nice to have an alternate key for a specific command. Moving on to the video settings, we've got full screen, we've got borderless windowed mode, and we've got windowed mode as well. So everything you'd expect to find in the display section of the screen. You can change the monitor refresh rate. Let's try that again. You can change the monitor refresh rate, and you can also choose which monitor you want to be playing the game on if you have more than one. Moving on to the graphics settings, there are a bunch of presets for the game ranging from low all the way up until ultra, and there's a custom as well, which allows you to tweak which of these settings to the preferences that you desire. I'll load into the game using Ultra just so you guys can see what the performance is like. I'm running on an i7-920 at 3.5 GHz with 12 GB of RAM and a GTX 970 factory overclocked in SLI. I'm also using the latest Nvidia drivers, which have added SLI profiles for both Rise of the Tomb Raider and the Division beta. With that said, let's move on. We have VSync. So we can have it on auto, we can have it on, or we can have it off. I will turn it off for the purposes of this demonstration. Normally I play with VSync on because tearing drives me up the wall. We can set the frame rate limit from 120 down to 30. So for those of you who have 144 Hz screens, there doesn't seem to be an option for that. But I suppose we should be happy that there is a 120 Hz option here. Then we have shadow quality, shadow resolution, spot shadow count, spot shadow resolution, and it's also nice that each of these, if you mouse over it for long enough, gives you a little bit of a description about what the setting actually does. That's always nice to see. Context shadows, we have post FX anti-aliasing, so we have SMAA ×1, we can turn it off. We have low, medium, high, and ultra variations of that setting. We have temporal anti-aliasing. Between stabilization, and we have super sampling, or we can turn it, we can't turn it off, so we have basically stabilization mode or super sampling. We can choose to sharpen the image, particle detail, wind affected snow particles, volumetric fog reflection quality, which on ultra setting is set to medium by the looks of things, local reflections, subsurface scattering and isotropic filtering, parallax mapping, ambient occlusion, depth of field, object detail, extra streaming distance, chromatic aberration. I'm glad to have this feature here. I will turn that off. I find it always tends to blur the image. In my experience, I don't really like it. I don't see the point. But that is personal preference after all. Lens flare and vignette effects. Now I'm not going to explain what all of these different settings do. You guys can just mouse over them to get the descriptions, and I'm sure by now most of you are quite familiar with what these different settings are. Moving on to the visuals, we have a brightness setting, and these are visuals are on-screen displays and hints and whatnot. So for instance, damage numbers, we can show the radar, the distance, we can change from metric and imperial units. Vault and climb indicators, so when you are at objects that you can vault or climb up or vault over, you'll have a little prompt on the screen telling you to press spacebar. Showing your shadow indicators, auto hide the HUD, which is a good idea. You don't always need it visible, especially when you're not in combat. And you can change the reticle opacity, thickness, and shadow opacity, and all that kind of thing over here. And we have language filters and player levels and whatnot as well. Moving on to the audio, we have music, sound effects, and dialogue volumes. Always good to see that there are 3 separate settings for all of these things. We can choose the mix type between home cinema and TV speakers. There's no headphone sitting here, but that's not too bad anyway, doesn't really matter. Mute audio when focus is lost, so if you're alt-tabbing to something else. Group chat volume, proximity chat volume, whether or not your microphone is enabled, the microphone that you're currently using for your in-game chat, and auto talk sensitivity, microphone boost, and push to talk. Under language settings, there are a bunch of languages to choose from, so you can pick whichever one is your preference. We can change the dialogue language as well, and we have subtitle languages as well as disabling and enabling subtitles. And then finally we have third-party settings, which are settings for an LED keyboard support. I don't have an LED keyboard. I'm running on a G11 Logitech, so it's without the LED, so perhaps someone in the comments can let me know what this actually does. I suspect it probably is a health/ammo display, but again, I'm speculating. Okay, so let's continue into the game. Okay, so here we are inside the game. If you're wondering why the CPU usage is so high, I'm recording at the same time. It's not usually bordering on 100% there. But if we look up in the top left-hand corner, we can see the GPU usage is quite high, up on 87%. So it's got decent scaling, but at the same time, it drops very quickly. So we had it at 90%, I turned around, it dropped to 40%, and at the same time, the frame rate kind of tanked. As I said, I am running on ultra detail at the moment. So we can see it's using up 3 gigs of my GPU memory at the moment. But the GPU usage is not too bad, but like I said, it kind of hops up and down. The frame rate is 40 now, 42, 43 as you can see, but as I turn around it kind of jumps all over the place. We saw 39 down there. Let's sprint down here. There we have it at 33, 41. So it's not a very smooth experience, to be honest, at this point in time. And you can see that the frame time also is quite high, 30 milliseconds there. And literally there's actually nothing going on at the moment in the game. I'm not in combat, just a basic empty streets with some snow falling. Of course there's a lot of geometry and I think the game looks nice. It looks nothing like the presentation that they gave at A3. It's kind of like another Watch Dogs, I suppose. Look, I mean, overall I don't think it's a disaster. It's not, you know, Batman Arkham Knight or anything like that. But I think there's definitely space for improvement. I mean, in an environment like this, there's no way it should be dropping to 50 frames a second on two 970s. But here I've changed it to medium. You can see immediately the frame rate is pretty much a stable 60 now, almost. As I said earlier, this game really shouldn't require you to have dual 980s and dual 970s to run the game in medium detail smoothly. So there's definitely room for further optimization in this version. And of course they have a month and a half to get this sorted out between them and Nvidia, and hopefully they do. But anyway, this was a look at the Division PC beta port and what kind of performance you guys can expect to have. As with any PC game, I'm sure there are different kinds of horror stories and stories of people having to be able to run it fine, depending on their hardware configuration. And because there's so many variations, people have a lot of different experiences. But this was my experience on the system that I'm running, and I thought I'd just let you guys know. If you have any questions or comments, you can let me know in the section below. I've been Charling, and I'll see you guys next time. Here we are. We can see this is one of the largest sort of view areas. You've got a large vista. You can see there's a lot of geometry on the screen at the moment. And I wanted to load this up just so you guys can sort of have an overview of the size and performance when you're looking at large scenes like this. This is Rook. Rook works for GIGN. Rook has armor. Armor is useful for your team. It can save your life